Back again, YouTube friends, with my new message and no holding back now. Since racism or the topic on race coming up, changing all that in politics and back to politics now. But of course, I will do continuous mixture of who I originally am, as far as who's originally me, my original character. When I say who I originally am, as far as spiritual, more than being political. But no holding back now. The origin of the black mentality. Now, since all this coming up, I wanted to discuss about that. Now, a lot of white America and a majority of black America who lost and do not have a clue wonder about where the black mentality come from, or not just in all blacks, but a big majority. And as I put up in a little summary of the description, as far as laziness, crime, robbing and killing, and this that. Okay, let's begin. Now, first, I would like to start off with, I guess, crime. As far as you know, amongst African Americans, they are a lot of young African American males are highly populating the jails because of the fact of low self-esteem, because of laziness, because of not being able to absorb negative feedback from others, or being put down, not be able to deal with that. So that involves a lot with low self-esteem. Now, if you remember back in the slavery days, in the early 1800s and so forth, of course, during that time or whatnot, before the slaves even came about on this soil, the Europeans the one came over and invaded and robbed and raped and stole from the African land and from the Egyptian land. So that's point number one. As far as where did robbing and stealing come from, and taking and all that. Well, the mentality in the black race, as far as robbing and stealing, not just the black race in general, but the weak-minded, the young and the foolish, as far as that mentality came from, not just the young and the foolish, but the weak-minded and foolish, period, because there are some elders as well. That came for the Europeans coming over and stealing and taking away and robbing and all that from the Africans. Where over in Africa, had they go in Egypt and all different parts, Ethiopia, had they go, the chains, the jewelry, the diamonds, some everything in Africa, Europeans come over and take it. Now, the Africans didn't have pistols. They didn't know anything about guns. They only had spears and swords. They didn't have a swords, mostly like spears and bow and arrows and blow darts. So as far as the guns and where that came from, as far as, always having a gun, shooting and killing one another, that came from the people who gave them guns, who gave them weapons. Just like in America, how Bush or a lot of presidents selling weapons over to Saudi Arabia and different Pakistan and all them places. That's how they got guns and weapons, because America's selling it to them. So the same way what happened in the African race is that they got sold guns and using guns one another. As far as the mentality of blacks getting in gangs, the gang jumping on people and coming together, that mentality came from when a lot of whites, or ancient or primitive whites, that's why I say Europeans, came together and had little gangs or whatnot that they had, stomping and picking on a black slave, mind his business and going about, and because they was racist and because they have the evilness in their heart, there'll be a gang of whites that start to jump this person for no particular reason at all. So the violent mentality, as far as where it came from, it came from the people who, the African Americans, were victim of violence. It came from them who made them victims of that violence, and those were the ancient Europeans. So that's where a lot of that mentality come from today. smoking tobacco, smoking and drinking. Once again, over in Africa, it wasn't no beer, no alcohol, nothing like that. Wasn't no cigarettes or tobacco. You know, all that stuff came, from Germany. German, like I said, Germany, Europe, places like that, where tobacco and beer is highly elevated and highly popular. So didn't know nothing about that neither. So all these different traits, as far as an African American race, as far as where it came from the people who turned them on to that, or the people who got them involved with that, as far as negotiating and end up raping and the environment they grew up around. I said African Americans, or not African Americans, but Africans. Africans grew up used to their own culture. Out in the fields around animals and herding goats and this, that. Then Africans converted and turned into African Americans, adapting to a new culture. The culture of the Europeans, the culture of the Romans, which is to take, rob, and steal, which is to invade, which is to be violent. Those traits came from the Europeans and from the Romans. Now, as far as this hood mentality, you see a lot of young African Americans claiming hoods and this, that. Well, of course, they came from African Americans having the least of everything, and white America having the best of everything. As I already projected this in another one of my segments, another videos about that. But that's where they came from. As far as African Americans represent, my hood, this my hood, because that's the only thing that they had that they could claim. That's the only thing. So here you have whites back then giving the slaves old beat up shacks, old torn up pillows. Just like I said, the least of everything while they had the best. So the slaves living in this beat up environment that is not up to par as with the slave master. So they in these beat up shacks, beat up houses, these apartment complexes. They used to build things like that where the slaves be all packed and bundled in this building with different rooms close together, while slave masters need big beautiful homes out in the country and this, that. So all those different traits right there is where it came from as far as the origin of the black mentality. Robbing, stealing, killing came from the people who they was victims of being robbed, being killed, and being stole from. Shooting, gun violence, and gang violence came from the people who, once again, African Americans were victims of being jumped on and spit at and stomped on by white gangs or European gangs, stumping them. Gun violence came once again, whom African Americans were victims of people who used gun violence on them, which were Europeans, ancient white America. So as far as this trait, when a white white lady, or it's in all races. Not just a white woman going down see a black person on the street and pull her purse up and draw it back, but black as well. But for a white person to say, "Oh, blacks are they so violent, they steal and they this that," well, where did they get that mentality from? From whom? The people whom they were victims of getting stole from, getting raped, getting beat, getting jumped. That's where that mentality came from, is the people who turned them on to that mentality. The people who they was victims of it. And like I said, the knowledge I receive, it comes from God. It comes from God. As Jesus said, the Holy Spirit will guide you in all truth. And this is the truth I give you. So white America, wake up and open your eyes. Like Barack was talking about, harm for the white ears about the message. Well, you still don't justify the way Reverend Wright came off. He could have came a lot more humble. But this is what black America got the mentality. From the ones who they adapted to. From the ones they adapted to. So, peace be unto you. Christ for life.